Our task force of investigative journalists has uncovered the greatest story in the world ever. It has shaken Canberra to its very core.
Okay, it's a good yarn. 60 Minutes, The Age and the Herald. Everyone's jumped on board. They love to bash a union. It's got bikies, kickbacks and corruption. Nick McKenzie's come up with the goods yet again. He's nailed the scalp of CFMEU hard man John Setka. The Victorian branch of the CFMEU is in administration. Queensland and New South Wales are in disarray. Well done. Corruption is bad, but it's also a convenient story. It's convenient, this story, for Nine and Murdoch, the coalition media duopoly. The government subsidised coalition media duopoly because the unions provide a lot of money to Labor. So not to detract from Nick's yarn one bit, but it is a convenient assault on Labor's funding base. The union bashers of the Fin Review are drooling so hard that you can almost feel the spittle oozing from their homepage. Here it is. Wall to wall. Corruption. Indignation of the highest order. The SMH and Age 2, all the same, all going into overdrive. Their supposed rivals over at Rupert Murdoch's national daily, The Israelian, never saw a billionaire they didn't worship or a union they didn't despise. They were ecstatic too. Let's put the boot in. Let's crush Labor's funding model. Perhaps BHP will give us more money too. The biggest story was revealed this week right here, Michael West Media. Nobody will touch it, so we had to, and that's why you support us. Thank you. To go to these places where none other will venture, and there's more to come. Now, with the help of a source, we first twigged to this when we were checking out some AEC political donations data earlier this year, and we found one payment to Labor buried, interred in the data, which stuck out like dog's balls. A $40 million donation classified as other. Other is what you call them when you don't want to say what you're doing, when you want to hide something, you call it other. Just $40 million, $39 million in fact, of other. It was from a mob called Ableshaw, which nobody had ever heard about. Not even Ableshaw's mum knew of its existence. And that's because when we went searching the ASIC database for Ableshaw, we found it was one of Glencore's myriad of hundreds of companies, some which even don't have a name, they just have a number. They're so busy hiding themselves. And there was a second payment of about $8 million. So there's $48 million in donations from the mysterious Ableshaw. Who was this Ableshaw? Well, it's owned 100% by the infamous Glencore coal trading juggernaut, the Swiss-based embargo busters. But why? What are they doing making this payment? Well, this led to a web of company joint ventures which showed that the unions were owning things or are owning things, some things have changed over the years, with the multinational companies themselves and with the government indeed. The unions, the government and the multinationals in this web of company ownership. And actually the mining lobbyists as well. You don't want to cut them out for their cut. The money trail effectively showed the union in bed with government and coal giants in a secret affair, a daisy chain of profitable operations where the government makes money, the unions make money, and the multinationals make money too. And the labour hire mobs, of course, are in there for their cut. So who doesn't make money? Fancy that. The workers are getting ripped off. Now later, we discovered a bloke called Simon Turner, a coal miner. Simon had had a spine injury working at BHP's Mount Arthur mine in the Hunter Valley. He'd had his back injury, but it wasn't properly tested. He was called back to work straight away and made to sit on a bench for various HR reasons. And then when he finally did have his proper tests, they found that there was a spine injury. Meanwhile, Simon, convalescing in his hospital bed, was doing the work. What was my compensation? He had the incentive because, as he found out, he was being paid $400 a week as a casual labourer at the coal mine, illegally as a casual. And Simon lived below the poverty line for 6 years while working in a coal mine the biggest in Australia, I think Mount Arthur is, where he should have been paid under the statute, under the award, $137K per year, not $400 a week. Now, we looked at all the entities involved in paying him and his insurance situation and compensation avenues, and while convalescing, he found that not only had he been grossly underpaid, but that was the case too for many of his colleagues working in the coal mines. He discovered what turned out to be a $2.5 billion wage theft, at least. How so? Because under the Black Coal Mining Award, you can't be employed as a casual. It is not permitted. It is not legal. But here was BHP and others like Glencore and Anglo, presumably Whitehaven and others too, via labour hire companies in the Hunter Valley, paying him as a casual. Now, what is the upshot? The story has been put before the Liberal Labor coalition, and they do not want to know about it. 60 Minutes and 9 newspapers have it as well. They don't want to know about it because nobody has an interest in this money fiesta coming out at the expense of workers. Now, since discovering this a few years ago, Simon has faced an army of lawyers in his attempt to achieve justice. You see, for Labor, this means funding via the CMFEU. For the Coalition and Labor, this means funding by political donations, political payments is more accurate, from the big mining companies, the Glencores and the BHPs and the mining lobbyists such as the Minerals Council, New South Wales Minerals Council, the Queensland Resources Council. And they like low pay, the Coalition. They like tiny wages because that is part of their creed. They think it is efficient, and they just go in relentlessly, inexorably to bat for large corporations because they are paid by large corporations. So neither Liberal, Labor, Nine or News Corp, the government-funded media, would go near this story with a barge pole, and the unions don't want the story out there because it is their sneaky funding. Nobody wants it out there. Hopefully some coal miners may want it out there, may join Simon's legal action. So here it is. There's more conflicts of interest here than a Saigon cockfight. You've got the corporations, BHP, Glencore, Yancoal, Anglo, Whitehaven. You've got the insurance companies, and this was part of the puzzle which Simon Turner figured out when he was trying to work out what his statutory situation should be. You've got a thing called CMI, Coal Mines Insurance, which is owned 50% by the CFMEU and 50% by the New South Wales Minerals Council, a bunch of lobbyists, fossil lobbyists, which represents the mining companies. The lobbyists are even in on the act for their quiet quid. The conflict of interest is that the union, which is supposed to stand up for the safety of mine workers, owns the monopoly insurance company with the mine owners. Why then would they agree to a decent payout for an injured worker? That means less money for them. It's hardly arm's length. Chandler McLeod is everywhere. They're real gravy trainers. Chandler McLeod, which is a labour hire firm, one of the biggest in the country, used by the corporations to put distance between the workers, they do payroll for the workers, and the large corporations. It delivers them legal distance. Now, Chandler is Japanese owned. Its ultimate holding company, Recruit Holdings, is in Japan. Now, the conflict here is that the labour hire group has billions in federal contracts, including even with the Department of Defence and Fair Work Australia, who is also in this mix for the story. Chandler is used for payroll, and then we have the government. Now, the government wins. They win because Coal LSL, an agency long service leave, Coal LSL, is the federal government corporation which raises the 2.7% wage levy from workers. Casual employees never take their LSL, their long service leave, or rarely. They don't last long enough to take it, so that just cascades down into the government coffers. The government just books this to consolidated revenue. Now this role, their role, Coal LSL, is contracted out to a mob called Ozcoal Superannuation, which is owned by none other than the CFMEU. Who owns Ozcoal? That's who gets and processes the 2.7% levy from every worker, coming directly out of the weekly wages of the coal miners. But when the wage is illegal, which this is, well, certainly it's been contested in court, but when you're one man against an army of lawyers, you know who's going to prevail. Coal LSL has no employees. Auscoal pays the levy to the government, so they are in cahoots with the government, the union, for this little gravy train. An estimated 98% of casual workers, says Simon Turner, never get to take long service leave, so the government keeps that money a nice little earner. You're not going to try and upset this little apple cart? Now, Auscoal itself is owned 50% by the CFMEU and 25% apiece by the industry lobby groups representing the big miners. That's the New South Wales Minerals Council and the Queensland Resources Council, the fossil rhetoricians, the fossil fuel lobbyists. Then we look at the lawyers. Fair Work Australia, it's heard cases around this, and it's agreed in proceedings in 2018, to quote them, "We can confirm the award," that's the Black Coal Mining Award 2010, "doesn't have a casual rate for this level." Simon Turner is now preparing a compensation case, again, for workers' comp redemption, which cover lump sum payments up to the retirement age. He's claiming they're illegal because the certificate of currency had him pay $28,000 a year. To quote Simon, "They were paying me 80% of that, when my full pay under the award for 78 weeks is $137,000 a year." Now, there's been a bit of a cover-up. Labor, of course, are cognizant of all this, and Tony Burke's recent IR reforms have addressed in some way some of the injustice for coal workers, perhaps not historically, but they've done a fix-it job. The conflict of interest remains, the money trail remains. The new protected rates of pay will not apply until November this year, so loopholes stay, and the industry has time to rewrite its labour policies. It'll cost them 25% more rather than what they were paying, much less than they ought to have under the law, and using casuals illegally. So as you can see, there are so many players across the business, union and political spectrum that do not want this story to come out, and it's the poor workers who cop it. It's a big story, nobody will touch, just too hard. Thank you for your support, because it enables us to do the work, as you can see, with these complex Byzantine corporate structures and who owes who to what on whatever gravy train. It takes a lot of work to do this, and then we've got to have the videos produced, so we appreciate your input in helping to fund independent investigative journalism.